We should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered for this meeting. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of the Patwin people, including the Yochadehe Winton Nation today. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be gathered here today on their traditional lands. Greg, there's a lot of people coming in right now.
That's fine.
Yeah, you're over 30. So I just wanted to share one more screen. Admit all. I'm just going to say this out loud. The June 23rd is going to be is coming up, and I'll send an email out about that. And then the 14th of July will be the helpline discussion, questions that they've been getting at the helpline. And on the 28th will be the 2022's Global Warming Acceleration Effective Actions. And Deb Sorrell is going to do that. Okay, it's all yours, Greg. I'm going to keep admitting people and I'll share. We should share your screen now.
Okay. Am I ready to roll?
Yes.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to today's presentation. My name is Greg Douhan. I'm a citrus farm advisor in the Valley. I cover Tulare, Fresno, and Madera counties. Not Yolo, but I'm very much willing to help anybody who's doing this because it's part of my job, basically. So I'm glad to be here. I'm going to talk a bit about citrus, just kind of basics with the watering, the nutrients, and the disease management, the sort of things you would see. Some of it might not be, since you're farther north, it's a little bit different, but most of it's pretty much the same. So anyhow, and here's my email if you want to give me an email, and that number that's on the screen right now is actually my cell phone number. So if you want to give me a call sometime and ask me a question, I have no problem with that. And then also, if you don't have a pen and paper, if you type in, you know, the UCCE Tulare office, my name will come up in the contacts. Contact me there. Okay, well, it's not forwarding. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, so we'll start off with the basics. And then the way I like to break this down for master gardeners is plants are pretty simple, right? You have leaves, you have shoots, and you have roots, and all of them have their own different sort of things that they have to deal with it. But it's a lot different than, say, a human that has organs and a vascular system and all these other things. I mean, not to say that plants aren't sophisticated, but they're just not as sophisticated, say, as an animal, human body. But so those are the things you just got to keep in mind. It's like you have to deal with the roots, you got to deal with the shoots, and then ultimately as a homeowner, you want to have some nice good fruit, right? Those are the sort of the points. So if you look into the roots down here on this side here, this is showing a root system that has not looking good. See how brown the tissues are? This is from Phytophthora root rot. It's a super common disease. It's found everywhere in California, everywhere throughout the world. And the root system here on the left is a nice healthy root system. So if you dig into your root system, so like let's say you think your tree's declining or something, most of the major feeder roots are only about 12 inches or so below the soil. So you can just kind of dig down and look at your roots. I mean, get in there and dig them up. And if they look healthy, then they're healthy. If they look brown, then you might have an issue. And this is just showing a cross section of what the root system looks like. So this inside part is where the water system basically moves nutrients and things up into the top part of the plant. And all these other cells protect that plant, or try to protect the plant from this whole vascular system. So, I mean, the thing is, it's, you know, we don't have to be technical about this, but you just have to think that, you know, these plants are just like people. You know, they have cells, they have organelles, they do all these things. So it's important to think about these things at least. Gosh, this stupid thing. And then thinking about the shoots, and this is like, don't get, there's a lot of information in here that you don't need to really worry about, but the whole point of this slide is to think about as a homeowner, right, is that you have water in the soil and there's nutrients in the soil that have to get uptaked into the plant, and they transferize out of the cells. So that's what all this stuff is really showing you, is all these things that can go on. So they are complicated. It's not as complicated as the human heart and this and that, but it is complicated. But everything's fed off of, you know, essentially gravity and transpiration. So if a plant, I mean, obviously most of you know, when you don't water your house plant and they wilt, they don't have water. You know, it's pretty simple, right? Because that water keeps the cells alive, it keeps the leaves nice and tense. But when they lose that leaf tension, then the plants wither and they start to die. So that's just kind of a thing to keep in mind. And I'll talk a little bit about more of that later. And the other thing with the leaves, you probably have noticed that the leaves of a citrus tree have a really good cuticle layer. So on this picture up on the front, you can see how the leaves are very waxy and the water is beating off of them. And that's a good thing. So when you're thinking about your leaves, like if you're planting, you don't want to plant a new citrus tree in a certain time where the leaves can't harden off to deal with either winter or summer, right? Because we have cold snaps and we have super extreme heat snaps. So you want to plant in the middle ground where you're not going to have it be too hot and too cold. That's a good thing. And this bottom picture is just showing some of these nutrient effects and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then just kind of thinking about this, once again, this is more scientific stuff that you probably don't really care too much about, but just think about it. You have this cross section of a leaf here on this picture, and it shows the waxy cuticle layer on the top. You have all these cells in the middle that are taking the sunlight and basically turning air into sugar and making these great fruit that we love. And we have these cells on the bottom that are called stomata, and this picture on the right actually shows them. So these leaves, these cells actually open and close to let oxygen in and out, or CO2. So there's a lot going on in a leaf that you probably don't even think about, but that's what's going on with these things. So they're important. And basically the leaves regulate themselves. So if it's too hot or too cold, these cells will open or close. And this is the basic major thing. I mean, this is what basically makes life on Earth possible, is photosynthesis. So I just want to make that crystal clear. So people would die if we didn't have plants because they provide oxygen to our planet. So we have sunlight, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, oxygen gets released by the plants. It's unbelievably important that these things are there. So that's why people talk about forest deforestation or all these things. It's because we're screwing up our planet. So we need plants. And that's actually, to be quite honest, that's the reason why I went into botany, which is the study of plant biology, is that plants don't need people. People need plants. Because if we all were exterminated, the plants wouldn't care. They would just keep going, doing their own thing. So if we talk about watering, and this is always a big issue with homeowners when I talk about them, is over drying and over watering are pretty much the big issues with citrus. And I'll have to preface this too in saying that citrus are extraordinarily resilient plants. I mean, they can be just brutally not cared for and they still keep going and going and going. So most people tend to over correct things by being a little bit crazy. So, and the other thing is that they're evergreen. They need to be watered year round. And then obviously in the summertime, when it's super hot, they need more water. And in the wintertime, they don't need that much water. And the other thing is you have to think about where your citrus tree is planted. Like, for example, I'll show you a tree of my house here in a little bit later. If your tree is next to a fence and the root system is down and going into your neighbor's yard and they have a grass and their grass is green, meaning that they water, then your tree is probably going to be completely watered all by your neighbor. So save your water. So just think about those sort of things. And the crucial time for watering is really when the fruit set comes in. So about 1 inch diameter, the trees need to be nice and hydrated to get that developing fruit. So later on in the season, the fruit will develop and be nice and sweet and great and all that stuff. The other thing is the trunk and bud union should always be dry. So this is one thing that I even tell commercial growers, and every time I go out in the field, I still see it time and time again. Don't water the trunk of your tree, okay? Because it induces particular kinds of diseases that can be completely avoided if you just keep water off the trunk. You know, the roots are in the ground. Don't water the trunk. Okay, so that's something to think about. So some of the 3 common irrigation methods that most people use is basin, drip, and sprinkler, and they're sort of kind of the same thing. Most people don't do basin stuff anymore because, you know, you go back in the days before drip came along and they did flood irrigation. They still do it with walnuts, but, you know, it just wastes so much water. And obviously, we've been in a drought forever. I know the news has been saying 3 years, but I've been saying 15 years. We're in a drought. It's crazy. So save your water. I'm gonna go back. So an easiest thing to do is when you plant a new tree is just to put in a little, like a 3-foot diameter, water to about 2 to 3 foot, basically. And you can use this method for a year or 2 or 3. It's basically you want to establish the root system, because basically, kind of like you see the billboards, like food grows where water flows, but like with citrus, roots grow where water flows. So if you keep the root system in a smaller contained area where there's water, you won't have expanding root systems otherwise. So it's pretty simple that way. And then sprinklers, if you go gallons per minute versus drip gallons per hour, the first year basin is still a good idea with a bubbler, I think, but it's also, in my opinion, well, I'll talk about this a little bit later. But thinking about water requirements, and this is once again, you got to think about the size of your tree, right? You got a young tree that's only 3 to 5 foot. It's actually using 3 gallons a day that's transpiring, going from the root system up through transpiring out the leaves. And then you go up to all the way through a large mature tree, like these big trees, 60 gallons of water. So that's a lot of water that's being consumed by these trees. And mind you, this is in July. Obviously, in the winter time, when the trees are kind of just shut down, they're not transpiring a lot of water. They're pushing all their energy into the sugars.
Wait, I just lost you. I'm sorry. I haven't had that PO box for a long time.
What was that?
Nothing. It's all good.
Okay, so so that's just one thing to think about, that these trees take a lot of water, but they don't necessarily have to. That's my take on message. The frequency of water, like I said, it changes during the frequency of the season. Soil types are dependent. So if you have really, if you have a clay soil, then you want to water less frequently, because the water just builds up and then the roots will die because they get asphyxiated from lack of oxygen. But if you have a nice sandy loam soil, then the water will trickle down and it's all fine. So you got to think about your soil type. And I just have basic things. Here's my number one rule of thumb. Water when the top few inches of the soil are dry and below is slightly moist. So basically you can walk out to your plant, go about 2 or 3 feet from it, take a shovel or something, and just, if it's dry, give it some water. If it's moist, don't worry about it. Because like I said, most people overwater their plants. That's like, they overwater their plants and they end up killing them. So the other thing with this rule of thumb too is, if you're a person who is very conservative about your water and you don't want to waste water, all you have to do is look at your plants. And so if your citrus tree starts having this leaf curling, usually in the morning, it's the easiest way to see it, then the plant's telling you, hello, I need some water. But if it looks fine, don't water. Save your water. California needs our water. I'm telling you, these plants are very resilient. They can handle a lot of stress. I mean, you just have to, I know you guys are in Yolo County, but if you're driving from like Bakersfield up through the valley here and you go through all these orchards and off the 65 that have been abandoned for like 5, 6, 10 years, those plants are still living. They look like crap, but they're still alive. Just keep that in mind. So this is my big tree. This is in the back of my house. It's probably an 80-plus-year-old Washington navel. I don't know, because I just bought the place a few years ago. But I abuse this tree. I never water it. I never cut any, I never do anything. I don't add pesticides. I don't do anything. And it just produces and produces and produces. And I pick and pick and pick and give as much to my neighbors as I possibly can. And you can see the top of the tree in this picture. I can't get up there because the tree's too big. So it's just sort of my kind of, it's my own spin on these things that, like, a lot of times people overthink about worrying about their plants. If it's not worth it. So if you're looking for citrus nutrition, successful fruit production requires an adequate supply of nutrients for a plant, which is obvious, right? Just like we need food, plants need food. Deficiencies, like we would do as well, reduce the vigor of the tree, the fruit, the sweetness, so on and so forth. And this is a lot of extraneous information you don't need to know, but there are these macronutrients and there are micronutrients. And the main thing is the nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, which are in the bubbles there. And you've probably all seen this when you go to the store and you look at the fertilizer, right? The fertilizer has a code. It's the NPK code. And all these codes are different for different things, right? So you can have, like, for example, I actually just went and bought one because I put in a vegetable garden, so I needed some vegetable garden nutrients to spread on my stuff, and it was like 6, 8, 4 or something like that, and I was kind of strange. Usually it's like 10, 10, 10, but I mean, all these nutrients are different, but it tells you basically what you're putting on. And usually on the information on these things will tell you how much you need to put. So they basically need nutrients. And then once again, like I said, this is just an example showing this NPK fertilizer. This one's 17,825. And so nitrogen's for having green foliage, phosphorus helps for the strong roots, and then you get healthy growth. So another thing to think about is there's a couple different periods to consider, and this is kind of mostly for more, I would say, for commercial people. I wouldn't think that a homeowner would even worry about this really, but you have your non-bearing trees, because when you plant a new tree in a commercial field, it takes 4 to 5 years to get a yield. So what the commercial people do, they want to maximize their growth because they don't care about the fruit at this point because they know it's going to be years. And then when the trees are bearing, they want to maximize the fruit and the productivity of the tree. So it's a little bit different. But once again, I say these are a little bit more technical. You don't have to worry about this stuff. The other thing to think about is that the essential nutrients for plants, all essential nutrients except CO2 and the oxygen for leaves, comes from the soil. Okay, so the soil characteristics are crucial to plant growth. So they need good mineral nutrients, pH. pH is a problem. Most people, I don't know what the issue is up in Yolo County. Like here, some places have pretty high pH. If you get about 7.8 or so, the citrus trees don't do quite well. But like I said, I'm not sure what's up in Yolo. Although I did a postdoc in Davis for 4 years, quite a while ago. Love that area. But you can use these chemical fertilizers to adjust some of the soil composition. And then our organic people use biological materials like mulches, manure, and compost to accomplish the same thing. And also with doing organic things, and when you mulch things into the soil, you actually add antagonistic microbes, bacteria and fungi that often are helpful to plants. So it's really good to mulch your stuff, like people they're always combing and making their trees look perfect with just dead soil. Nah, leave your leaves laying there. They'll decompose, they'll go back in the soil, and they'll replenish the plant. That's my take on it. There's also symbiotic organisms out there that can adjust and help with these plants. We also need aeration and water. Like I said before, if you have a high clay soil and you don't have air, a lot of people don't think about root systems that they actually need air. I don't know, the thing I always say is if I took one of you and threw you in a pool with a weight on you, you would drown and die, right? Because you couldn't breathe. That's what happens to soil and roots. They need air. So if they're saturated with water, the roots are going to die. So just keep that in mind. So one of these symbiotic organisms are called endomycorrhizae. These are fungi. And in this picture, you can see this is the purple parts are the fungal part, and they penetrate into the plant and they actually go inside the cells. And what happens is these fungi basically increase the root system by astronomical amounts because they're microscopic and they're growing all the way out. So what happens is the plant is photosynthesizing, making sugar, pushing it down to the root system. These mycorrhizal fungi feed on that carbon source from the plant, and then they work out and grab minerals and things from the soil that then they incorporate into the plant. So it's a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and the plant. And this has been going on for millennia. I mean, you can go, almost every plant has an association. Like, in fact, in this slide, 85% of plant families have these mycorrhizal associations. And most people don't really understand it or know about it, which is fine. It keeps going on, but it's just another thing to, think about. And this is just an example showing. So when you add some of these, this is just an example of this. I'm not promoting this company or anything. It's just a picture. But you get a plant that grows 3 or 4 times as much without or with or without the mycorrhizae than with. So when we talked about these 2 growth periods briefly earlier, nitrogen is the big thing. Nitrogen's like the main point of most of these fertilizers. And I'm going to go through some of these. I threw some stats in here, and I asked earlier before we started if you guys had all copies to the chapter for the citrus, because some of these stats come from that book, just to put it in there if you want to go back to that chapter and look. So we got to figure out, so it differs over time, right? You got small plants, you got big plants, just like, like I'm 52 and I eat a heck of a lot less than I did when I was 22. It's just the way it is. So 1/10 pound for up to 2 years, you got 1/4 pound for 3 years, and 1/2 pound for 4-year-old trees. So what does this mean? So there's, for bearing trees, 1 pound of actual nitrogen per tree. So this is kind of the main fertilizers that most people use are ammonium nitrate, ammonium sulfate, and urea. And you can see by these numbers, like we talked about before, they vary quite significantly, right? You got 3300, 2000, and 4600. So obviously, if you put too much of one thing on, depending on the type of nitrogen you're trying to do, you can basically kill your tree. So you got to pay attention. So if we're going for ammonium nitrate, we have 33 actual nitrogen trees needs 3 pounds. All right, so that's 33 to 3 pounds. You got 20% of nitrogen needs 5 pounds. And urea, of course, which is super high, you only need 2 pounds. And then of course, on all these products, there should be a recommendation, because all these companies don't want people to be putting on the wrong amount of applications. Because, like humans are humans, like, oh, I need to take an aspirin, I'll take 5. Well, you take 5 aspirin here on your tree, you might kill them. So read your labels. So how do you know when you don't have enough nitrogen? Well, and I apologize for some of these pictures are kind of old, but they tell the story. So you got these yellow leaves, right? Uniform yellowing versus this green leaf here. That's usually a sign of nitrogen deficiency. But there's other deficiencies, some of these micronutrients that you start seeing these really funky symptoms on your trees. So you'll get, so here's a picture showing some zinc deficiency. You can see how this kind of weird modeling is going on. Iron deficiency, see how yellow this gets, but yet the veins are kind of still green. See that? All these veins are still green. So that's a sign of iron deficiency. Magnesium's a little less obvious. You can see there's no one major symptom. So it's really, and I'll just tell you, most of these deficiencies are very hard to diagnose, to be quite honest. And you obviously, you don't see them too often because like I deal with commercial grows and they're constantly putting on stuff. So we don't see a lot of nutritional deficiencies in the field. Potassium's another thing, which in California soils, I've been told we have tons of potassium. There should never be potassium deficiency, but this is just another sign where you get these weird leaves looking like that. Boron is a problem sometimes in the wells that people have. You get high boron excess. That can be an issue. Homeowner, don't think you're going to have to deal with that because your water is coming from the town you live in. So what should you do if you think you have micronutrient deficiencies? So you're just kind of looking at your tree going, yeah, this doesn't make me happy. I got to do something. There are foliar sprays available, usually applied in the spring when the new growth is occurring. So that's when, you know, the plants are starting to push. They're physiologically active. They're doing their thing. That's when you want to put these products on there because they're systemic and they get inside the plant. You don't want to do it in the winter when they're not doing anything. And this is just a screenshot from Amazon, which I almost feel silly for showing because the guy doesn't pay taxes. But anyway, but you can see there's all these different supplies out there, these solutions you can buy for nutritional sprays if you think you need to do them. I don't know any people who really do that in the homeowner situation, but if you think you need to, then there's an option for these foliar sprays to get some extra nutrition back into the plants. But if you're just putting regular fertilizer on, watering in a normal matter, you probably won't have an issue. Okay, so I will, since I'm going to switch on to some of the diseases, I guess I will ask if there are any questions because I haven't been checking anything.
No questions yet.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to.
Oh, wait, there is one. Just came up.
Okay.
What is the importance of fungus not penetrating the cell membrane? That's Deb's question. Deb, did you want to explain? Where is she?
Yeah, if you come on, Deb, it'd be easier because I'm not quite getting.
It was just on one of your slides, the one where it was showing the mycorrhizae going into the plant stem or the root, and down below it said something like the fungus is not penetrating the cell membrane. And when you look at the picture, it looks like it has to penetrate it in order to.
Yeah, no, yeah. With these endomycorrhizae, they actually go in between the cells.
Oh.
And then when they get into, I didn't want to go into the details of all of it. They produce these structures that invaginate the cell membrane and like a finger. So it kind of, it pokes into the cell, and then the cells of the fungus or the membrane of the fungus and the plant interact between each other. So it doesn't actually penetrate and kill the cell. They just have a relationship.
Yeah, I gotcha. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, a couple of more questions came up. Is clover good for the nitrogen?
Well, clover, if I remember right, is a nitrogen fixing species, right? It's a Fabaceae, if I remember correctly. But clover is a weed, so I don't know if I would want it around my plants.
Next question. What would you recommend? What would be recommended NPK mix for homeowner backyard medium mature tree?
That's a good question too. I don't know for sure. I mean, when you go to, like I said, went to the store yesterday actually and bought the vegetable mix. I was assuming it was just going to be a standard 10-10-10. That's kind of a generalized, just gives you enough. Because the thing is, if you plant your plants and you already have good, I don't know what I'm trying to say. If you have like, I don't know. I couldn't say the perfect example of what one would be.
Next question.
All right.
Can you try one supplement like iron at a time? I have little tree with yellow leaves. There is fruit and it is healthy otherwise.
Can you try iron?
Can you try one supplement like iron at a time? I have a little tree with yellow leaves. There is fruit and it is healthy otherwise. That was Jana. Jana, do you want to come on and explain? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's so hard to predict, like when you're looking at something, because the
Okay.
thing is with like when you get leaves, they drop. It's just natural, right? When things start flushing, the older leaves drop off, and then
Yeah.
if you have continual growth and your plant looks good, then you have nothing to really worry about because things just drop off. It's just the natural cycle.
One last question. I have dwarf orange trees of this, and this is their third year in the ground. They flower and start fruit, but then it drops off.
Yeah, so are they on flying dragon rootstock if they're dwarf? Because that's the only
Adrian?
ones I know of.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's fruit drop is usually, like I said before, it usually takes about 4 to 5 years to start getting a crop. So if you were getting flowering and the fruit was setting and then the leaves, fruit was falling off, that's probably the natural progression. Like that big tree I showed you guys earlier in my backyard, I have a guy living in my mother-in-law's suite who decided to take out all my mulch. And I don't know why, but I noticed that when my trees flowered and then the fruit set, I had so much fruit drop, but I never noticed it before because I always had leaves everywhere. But I still have so much fruit on the tree. So I don't know what the percentage is. I know I used to work with avocado for a long time, and you get like 10,000 fruit or 10,000 flowers on a tree, you get 1% fruit.
Mm.
So with citrus, I'm not sure. That was like after I saw that, this was only a few weeks ago, I started thinking about that because I don't do physiology stuff. I don't know how much fruit drop there is naturally when trees are completely good and doing their thing. Something I got to look into.
Last question. Can you address anything unique about citrus in containers?
Citrus in containers, the only problem is, the watering. Once the roots get completely, root bound, they don't have anywhere to go. So you just have to deal with watering more. You know, it's not like a tree that's in the ground where the roots will spread out for, you know, meters and meters and meters. They're confined to a container. So if you keep them in there, you got to keep putting a lot of water on them, more than you would if they were in the ground. And then I would also advise topping them off a lot more, keeping them small so you don't have to waste as much water. That's the only thing I can think of. And then plus they'll lose more nutrients and whatsoever, because once the roots have taken away all of the organic material, which is in the soil, then it's just a root ball. So they need nutrients.
Yeah. That's it.
Okay, so we'll continue on. I was going to talk about some of the diseases you might see. And the one thing you might not know about is the citrus clonal protection program. And this is something you should all know about. You can go online through the CCPP and buy budwood if you're trying to do grafting. If you want to, because some people graft multiple varieties on one rootstock, and this has been going on for decades. But the problem is, and I'll show you, is that if you get budwood material from places that aren't regulated, you can bring in diseases that can cause unbelievable amount of losses. So in our example right now, I have a picture here of the Asian citrus psyllid. This causes the disease greening or honglong bean. And this originally came into Florida in about, I think it was 2004. And it was from a hand-grafted plant that somebody got some material from Asia. And that one plant caused the entire state of Florida to be in ruin. So I don't know if any of you are paying attention to this, but since that arrival of that disease, Florida's production has gone down like 75%. So that's an unbelievably massive amount of money. And that same thing is basically happening in citrus in California. We have this disease, HLB, which is in Los Angeles. It's all in residential areas. It hasn't moved to the commercial groves yet, but it's the same thing. It was somebody in their backyard who got some budwood from somebody from out of the country and planted it, and now we have this huge deal that's going on. But the point is, this citrus clonal protection program, you can Google it. It's through the University of California. You can buy clean budwoods and tested for 36 or 37 different graft transmissible diseases. And it's super cheap. It's like, I don't know, they send you a bud stick with like 10 buds on it or something for like $3 or $4. So if you want to do some backyard stuff, then go through the citrus clonal protection program. Do not get stuff from your neighbors. Do not get stuff from your friends. Do not get somebody from overseas. Don't do it. That's the bottom line. So with these viruses and viroid diseases that we have, so Exocortis, cirrhosis, tristeza. So I have these in red because I'm not really going to talk about them because of the CCPP, most of these issues are not even a problem in California. For example, the cirrhosis, and since 2016, I've seen one field with cirrhosis, and that was a 100-year-old grove. So it makes sense. Bacterial diseases, we got bacterial blast, and this is actually something I probably should have thought about more, because up in your guys' neck of the wood, this is actually an issue that comes up. It's a bacterial disease that causes little black dots on trees. I think it's usually on the southern side. We don't have it here in the valley, so I've never seen it. But I should have threw in a couple slides to talk about it. So you might want to note that, just if you're interested, that it's something that can happen. It's very minor. It's a very minor disease. Stubborn disease is another minor disease. And this Honglong being, this is the one I was just telling you about. It's a major issue. And we talk about fungal diseases. I'll just put them in here. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the anthracnose diseases and the fusarium and the phytophthora, a little bit about septoria. These other ones are pretty much, they're fairly minor, but the control measures are the same. The thing is, when you have when I go into these slides, when you have any sort of dieback issue, the only way to get rid of it is to cut it out. You have to cut into nice healthy wood, and you have to disinfect your clippers with like a 10% bleach solution so you don't transfer it to the next branch. But these organisms that get into the wood, they're into the wood. So even if you have the best systemic fungicide in the world, they wouldn't do anything because they're hiding inside the dead wood, colonizing it. So you got to cut them out. So you got to continually manicure your trees and cut out all the nasty dead wood, because it just harbors pathogens that are ready to pounce. So the most common issue that I see, even on a commercial level, to be quite honest, is a dying defoliating tree. And usually it's a result of a problem with the roots. Because in California, we have a very dry environment. We don't have a lot of foliar issues because we don't have humidity. For example, like in Florida, it's very dry here. So most problems come from the soil. And this is what I was telling you about before. This is the HLB disease. This is the insect right here. This is the Asian citrus psyllid. And these little waxy tubules that you see on here, very easy to see. And these little tiny insects right here are the nymphs of this adult, but they only feed on the very tender, expanding leaves. They don't care about the old leaves because they have all that wax. So the new flush. So if you're concerned about this particular organism, go out and look at your new flush. Might take a hand lens or something. But it's a very important disease because it is something that we're extremely concerned about, because at some point it's probably going to reach the valley and start doing what it did to Florida. We're doing everything we can to not happen, but it's probably going to happen. So here are some other symptoms. They call it greening because the trees don't ripen up right. You can see how the bottom part of the fruit is green, but the top part is yellow. And then the classic symptoms are this mottling of the leaves. It's not uniform like some of those nutrient deficiency things that I showed you earlier. It's just kind of random all over the leaf. And that's a big characteristic. And so if you think you might have this, because at some point it's going to happen, you got to call the CDFA. California Department of Food and Agriculture. I probably should have had a little thing on here, but they have people who will come out and look at your tree. They'll test it. They'll do these PCR, molecular biology things on it, figure it out. So if you think you have something that looks like this, but not like the nutrient deficiency. So if it, I don't want people just calling it CDFA like crazy, but if you have these weird mottling symptoms and the fruit look weird and you see these insects, then call them. So the other big ones that we have are Phytophthora. So these are, let me click through this. So there are 4 different species. You don't have to worry about the names of the species because the control measures are all the same. Doesn't matter. These 2 are the most important. The only thing about these 2 things that are interesting is one's more of a cool host parasite and one's more of a hotter parasite. And so they can basically do damage throughout the entire year. That's why they're a problem. These other number 3 and number 4, they're very rare, but they also can cause some of these. They occur in all areas of California, and all 4 species can cause all these diseases that we see, which is root rot, which is the number 1 problem. If your roots are dead, your tree's not going to grow. Gummosis, it's not very common, and brown rot is usually on low-lying fruit because people didn't skirt their plants and spores splashed up from the soil and got onto the fruit. So if you keep the plant skirted to about 2 feet or so, you probably will never see brown rot. So this is just looking at Phytophthora diseases. You can see this tree, right? It does not look healthy. I mean, I barely have you can see this tree is nice and green. But you can just see the thinning that's going on. So basically the root system is getting completely done with, and the plant can't keep up. It can't absorb water and nutrients up into the front, and the leaves can't supply photosynthesis and carbon and sugar to move down to the roots, and they just die. So this is another example showing, this is the gummosis I was talking about. It's not too common, but you can see here all this, basically the part above, usually with this one, it's usually above the bud union that you see it, because usually the scions, which are the top part of the plant, are more susceptible than rootstocks, because rootstocks are bred to be resistant or tolerant to things. So that's why I was saying don't water your trunk, because the trunk is the scion, and the scion's sole purpose is to produce nice juicy fruit that people eat. They don't care about disease resistance necessarily. If they can add disease resistance as the breeders would, they would, but most of the diseases these diseases are susceptible to these organisms. And then this bottom corner picture is just showing you again a tree. You've got one tree behind you that's nice and healthy, and another one's declining. And I was mentioning Parasitica is the warm season one, active from May to November. Mostly causes the gummosis and root rot. Phytophthora is the cooler one. November to March, it can cause the gummosis, root rot, and the fruit drop. So like I mentioned, these things can be active all year round. And the biggest threat, or the biggest problem, is using too much water. So I got some weird stuff on my screen here. So I'm going to show you a little video. Okay, so this is to show you that these fungi, this is in a petri dish, okay, of course, but it's to show you or to demonstrate how these organisms, the one thing you see in the screen right now, that is the reproductive structure of this fungus. Okay, it's going to open up, and these little spores are going to swim out, and they have little flagella on them, which is basically a whiplash. It's basically like sperm. Okay, we're all adults here, right? Like swimming sperm. And what happens is the citrus fruits or other plants, they produce exudates from their roots, and these organisms are attracted to those exudates. So if you have active water in your soil, and these things sporulate, they will swim down to your roots and they will infect them and they will kill them. So that's my preface. So this would be a short little video, but it's pretty cool, I think. Got to use the restroom, excuse me. Excuse me. So this one's pretty much this one's not real like the other one was. This is just showing, you know, I don't know, a fake video of what happens, but it's basically the same thing. And basically my take home message for this is don't over water your plants, okay? Especially if you have clay soil. If you have clay soil, you're asking for trouble, because these organisms cannot do anything if there's not free moisture. So this is just showing how these spores, when they hit the cell, then they insist, and then they pop out a little hyphae, and they penetrate into the plant, and it's game over. So here we go. So just like I said, control, don't over water. Avoid watering trunk. Spores need water and roots need to breathe. So those are like take-home messages, like 3 or 4 times. And like I said, use your own intuition. You know, like that picture I showed in the morning when the leaves are cupping. Just don't over water your citrus plants. That's my take home message. So don't over under water. Avoid watering the trunk. Once again, skirt the trees to avoid the burnt rot, and fungicides, Rhythm and Alliet are available for Phytophthora, but most people don't need to even worry about it because it shouldn't happen if you have good management practices. So another issue with citrus diseases is secondary pathogens. Fusarium solani is another one. Gosh, these pictures are so granulated. Sorry about that. So basically this Fusarium is another one that I see a lot. And the problem is that this is it's a secondary pathogen. So it basically will infect a tree once the tree's already sick, right? So if the tree's healthy, this Fusarium could be billions of propagules in the soil and it will never infect the tree. But if the tree's sick, it can infect the tree. So that's why it's always a hard thing. I can always go out and say, oh yeah, you got Fusarium. Well, why you got Fusarium, I don't know. Did you overwater? Did you underwater? Did you have Phytophthora? Did you do, you never know, because these things just come in and take over. So it's easy to give the conclusion that, yeah, this Fusarium killed your tree, but what was the actual causal agent that caused this thing to happen? It's always hard. Always hard.
Greg,
Yeah.
I have to go, but I can leave the Zoom session open for you all to finish, and maybe one of the master gardeners could read the questions from the chat.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
All right.
Oh, going over time here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm leaving it on for everybody. Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Bye.
that's fine.
Bye.
I'll try to go through it quickly. Okay, so I'm just showing some pictures of what you can see with this fusarium. So you can see right here, see that browning, and then you have the nice green tissue. Same thing here, nice healthy tissue, browning. Same thing over here, and you can see why it got the name dry root rot. It just kind of rots out the roots. So it's pretty easy to diagnose yourself. You can just dig out some dirt from your tree and see. And if you cut open these things and look at them, you can see this big section of the root rot. And like I was mentioning earlier before about scions and rootstocks, you can see how this scion or this rootstock actually is completely colonized, but for whatever reason, it's not going up into the scion as much, which is kind of unknown and interesting. And then another one is Colototricum. It causes a lot of different diseases, and with that anthracnose, it's basically anything that causes sort of a lesion. Like plant pathologists want to say, oh, it's anthracnose, because it could be multiple species that cause these things. And in California, like I said earlier, we don't have much moisture, so we don't have a lot of these issues. I think most of these are taken from Florida samples. You know, you can find it here and there, but it's not like anything to worry about. But what we do see is these dieback symptoms. So if you see this on your tree, see this nice tree, and you get this gummosis here, this is gumming from the branch, that's Colototricum. And so what you'd want to do is go back about 3 or 4 inches and just cut the thing off, take it out of your house, put it in the green waste. And these are older ones, like I mentioned before already. Always cut back your dead wood, because you don't know what's living inside that dead wood. And when we get certain environmental conditions, whatever's in there is waiting to sporulate and spread. So cut your dead wood out. It's just more examples of showing, see, you can see here the dead wood versus the clean wood. So you want to go back, you know, if I was cutting this tree, I would cut back way back here to make sure I was way away from it. Another up close picture of some of this gummosis, little teeny gummosis signs here. Same thing, that's pretty common. And if you take cross sections, what you'll see is all this wood around here, all this tree is dead. The only living part of the tree is right here. So we got basically, 16th or something of the xylem and phloem, which is the water and nutrients flowing that was working. So this limb is basically destined to die. So it needs to be cut out. And right here, we got about 40%. That's all dead. That's all good. But eventually it will die. Cut it out. So there are no practices for this. It's just like I mentioned, it's this proper grove hygiene, good health, removal and destructive, get away, just take all the dead wood out. Got copper hydroxide sprayed on fruit to prevent the fungal disease septoria spot. So this is one that I don't think is I probably shouldn't even put this in there. This is something you don't have to worry about too much. But anyways, I did put it in there. But the one thing I'd like to say, because I didn't talk about insects or anything, and let me see, I think. Bottom line, not a lot of issues, don't worry about it. Okay, so that's kind of my take-home message, but I'll end it with this too, is that most of the things that commercial growers do are for cosmetic issues. So all the fungicide sprays, all the insect sprays they do, it's all for the fresh market, so the fruit looks perfect. But most of the problems of these things, they don't affect the fruit quality. So like I was telling you earlier, like I abuse my tree, but I eat the crap out of the fruit. It looks ugly. It's got sooty mold. It's got this and that, blah, blah, blah. But once you peel off the fruit or peel off the peel and eat the fruit, it tastes good. So that's the other thing I always tell homeowners. It's like, don't add extra things that you don't need to worry about. Because if the fruit tastes good, that's it. Don't worry about it. Doesn't matter if it's got little specks on it or, you know, whatever. That's my bottom line, I guess, on that. So are there any or questions that I think somebody was gonna?
I'll go ahead. This is Deb.
Okay.
There are about 5 questions. I'll answer them and then I'll stay on because the recording's still on. So I'll wait until everybody leaves and then turn that off. The first question is actually for me, and I think you may have answered it already, but it was after we looked at that citrus psyllid, and I wasn't clear about what, you know, if you've got that, what happens to the tree that you've got? Is it then removed, or is there any way to solve that?
Yeah, no, that's the problem. I should have spent more time on the citrus psyllid situation because it's extremely important. So what happens is once these plants are infected, it's doomsday. That's it. They're dead. There's no resistance. There's no cure. There's no nothing. So what CDFA does is when they find an infected tree, they pull it up, rip it up, and burn it. Or I don't know how they get rid of it technically, but it has to be removed. And then they go like 800 meters around and they test all the plants around that area to see if they have, because there's multiple plant species that actually can harbor this particular bacteria that the ACP vectors. So it's a really big issue. Like I said, I should have probably spent a little bit more time on that.
That was good. That's really good. The next question is how much longer is the session? And it's probably about 10 more minutes. You know, just how long it takes us to get finished. If you need to leave, you can leave. There's a recording and it'll be put online. And then let's see, the next question from Megan is, when is the best time of year to apply fertilizer?
Most people do it in the spring. You want to do it when the trees are flushing, right? That's when the new growth is coming on.
Okay. Then from Bob, the question is, what is a good watering schedule for a small citrus orchard?
Yeah, like I said, with watering, it's totally, I mean, I've been talking to people since 2016 and I never can get a straight answer on, you know, if you go like on a commercial scale in San Joaquin Valley, they talk about like 3 to 4 acre foot per year. On the coast, it's like 2, but in a homeowner issue, when you're just dealing with one plant, I don't know, but this person said a small acreage.
Small orchard, I think was.
Small orchard.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what you would call small, but I mean, I just go by my, like I said before, my rule of thumb is if the plants look healthy, don't worry about it. And they need more water in the summer than they do in the winter.
Okay. Then the last question from Norma is, should a lime tree, key lime, be treated differently from other citrus trees? Many lower branches turn black and dry out, which I cut off. Is this caused by the lack of water or a disease?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't give you an answer on that unless I would see it. But if the branches are dying off and you're cutting them off and everything's going well, then you're probably fine, I would guess. We have I've actually since 2016 have been to 1 lime orchard in California. There's not a lot of them in the valley. So I don't have a lot of experience with them, especially the ones that you would get at like Home Depot or something. Might be completely different varieties with different rootstocks or whatever. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I
Okay,
would say
great.
if the thing's green and you keep watering it and you keep cutting dead things off, you're probably good to go.
Yeah, I see Joy's got her hand up there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, Deb. I have a question, Greg. First of all, let me just say thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming. I am a co-chair of the help desk here in Yolo County, and we get tons of citrus questions. And my attitude has always been kind of like yours, that, you know, if the leaves are staying green and you water when you need to, and I fertilize a couple times a year early in the season, that I get delicious fruit and I don't worry about it.
Yeah,
But
you press the easy button.
yeah, I do have a couple of questions. One is, when my leaves are first coming out, I often have some that come out funky, wavy looking, not normal. And I don't know what causes that. I usually just cut them off and move on. And then the second question is about the citrus blast. I think a lot of the questions that we had at the help desk this year were about the brown spots on Meyer lemons, and I was pretty sure it was the citrus blast issue. And so my question is, should I be telling them to spray with anything for this Pseudomonas bacteria, or just not worry about it?
Well, my inclination is I would worry about it, because like I said right at the end, is like most things are just cosmetic.
Okay.
You're going to peel the fruit and eat it anyways. Who cares?
Okay.
if
What
there's
about
dots on it?
the wavy leaf thing? Do you have any idea what that could be?
Well, do you think you might have like leaf miner, like this insect called leaf miner that causes the leaves to get all kind of crinkly and weird looking?
That's what it's crinkly and weird. I've never seen any insects on it, but I'll look.
Yeah,
So
look
that could
for
be
it.
a leaf miner.
It's probably leaf miner, and they'll show a little. If you look at the leaves really carefully, there'll be a little trail of where the insect was kind of moving throughout the leaf. But the thing is, they're once again, it's totally cosmetic. It doesn't matter. Like
Okay.
commercial growers, if they have an infestation when the trees are really young, they'll try to go out and control it. But once the trees are well and established, nobody pays anything to try to control it, because the leaves just fall off and everything's all good.
Okay. Again, thank you.
Natural cycle of life.
Yeah. Thank you from all of us so much.
Yes, absolutely.
We really appreciate you doing this for us.
Yeah, good. Yeah, no problem. Next year, if you need somebody else, I'll be happy to help you out. I know it's outside of my jurisdiction, but hey, I work for California.
Excellent.
Okay, take it easy.
Thanks.
Thanks so much then, everybody. I think we're gonna go ahead and, if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Will there be a recording? Yes, there will be a recording, because I'm going to turn it off just as soon as you guys leave. That doesn't mean you have to leave in a hurry. I just mean that's the last thing that I'll do as we leave. Thank you all for coming. Good class.
Thank you for organizing it.
I think that's, yeah, that's both Mike and Mike Cluck and I can't remember her name right now, but the young woman from the library, they do all the coordination on that and set up the programs. So,
Oh, good.
yeah. Oh, also, if any of you want the chat, you can save off the chat and it will save down to your, that's only got the questions, so it hasn't got the answers. So just depends on what you want to do. Oh, Joe, that's her name. Okay, we're almost, everybody's almost gone. See, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording then. Oh, okay. See. Joan, I don't know if you're there or not. Can you turn off the recording? I don't have permission to. See if I can get her on the phone.
complete this call, you must first dial a 1 or 0 plus the area code and phone number. Please hang up and try your call again. Thank you for calling Yolo County Library. Please listen closely as our menu options have changed. For Stevens Davis, press 1. For Turner West Sacramento, press 2. For Winters, press 3. For Clarksburg, press 4. For Spark, you have reached the Yolo County Library, Mariel Beacon branch. For English, press 1. Para español, opcional. If you know your party's extension, you may dial it at any time. For hours of location, press 1. For account information, press 2. For reference, press 3. For children, press 4. For operator, press 0. To repeat this menu, press 9. Hey, how may I help?
Hi, I'm trying to get a hold of Joan Tuss. Is she at this?
This is me.
Oh, hi, Joan. This is Deb Sorrell.
Hi, Deb. After they finish up, I need to go close down.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know whether you realized that or not because I was going to
Yeah.
shut off the recording. Yeah, and I
I'll go
couldn't do
shut it
it.
off right now.
Okay.
Did he just end?
Oh, no, it's just taken me a while to figure out your phone
Okay.
number. It was probably about 15 minutes ago.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Bye. I'll go
You
turn it
bet.
off.
Okay, take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.